So I'm out here at Pickerington Ponds today, and I'm a little out of breath because doing some sprint intervals. It's a good spot for it. It's nice and flat. So dual purpose for being out here. It's flat, so I can do speed a little easier than some of the other trails that I run, which are much hillier. So you don't get a lot of sustained sections where you can just run, fast. Well, fast for me, being a maybe 7.5 or 8 minute mile pace. The other purpose is I have a Coros watch, and they debuted the Evo Lab a few months back. It's sort of their, it tracks recovery and performance and race predictor, things like that. But you have to run, I think it's 300 minutes of flat to turn it on. So I hadn't even bothered, but when they announced their newest watch, it's going to take advantage of the Evo Lab matrices and stuff even more, I think. So I wanted to test it out before I consider dropping $700 on the new Coros watch, which looks great, but I need to see what this system is like, or the program is like. So for the next week or two, I'm making myself come out here and run flat stuff to turn the Evo Lab on and then see how good the data is. So that's what we're doing. Just going along about a 7-minute mile pace. Hey, little one. Bugs are eating me alive. It's rainy, it's muggy, it's hot, and the bugs are everywhere. Yikes. First mile's done, so I'm gonna walk for a bit so I can talk. This is gonna be I'm just gonna walk till I'm done talking. Run after that. So this week, or last week, was a sort of a brutal reawakening, a brutal realization that I started running about 4 months ago, but I've been ultra curious for quite a while, and then something happened in my personal life that motivated me to try to do something really hard in solidarity with someone who had some real problems in their life. So signed up for a 50K in November, but my longest run prior to this training block had been 13 miles, or had been a half marathon. So, but last week, in the first week where I got like about 40 miles in, the long run was a 14 miler, and it just wrecked me for 2 days really, and not physically, or at least not physically as it relates to like my legs or anything. My legs were actually fine, which I was happy about, but it was like a metabolic breakdown. The program that I'm following is sort of the kind of 50K program that like a pro or elite athlete would follow. It's not like a couch to 50K. I don't think such a thing really exists, but So it's real ass adult miles. And it's the first time that I've really had that. My system has really had that. My glasses are fogging up. So the long runs that I'm doing now, from here on, well, actually, including last week, going forward, will all be the longest runs I've ever done. So me doing 14, then 16, then 18, then 20, 22, 24, like that, as long runs, is not the same as someone who's run 10 or 15 50Ks, and it's their normal training program, and it's nothing for them to do a marathon length training run, which is where I hope to be, obviously, but it's just not going to happen 4 months in. And this is not like unrealistic self-doubt or being down on myself or anything. I'm being realistic here. I'm totally fine with the aspect of, or with the prospect of failure, which is what I suspect is going to happen in November at the Fire Swatch 50K. I think I probably have a DNF in my future. Like I said, I'm fine with that. I don't really care about that part of it. I'm just trying to be careful with my training to not overwhelm this new runner body and make it impossible for me to progress. So I'm still doing the training program, and we're going to chip away at it, and we're going to see how I do. Honestly, I think I'll probably DNF a couple of the long training runs, because they get up, you know, I think maybe to 20 miles. I'm fairly certain I could, when I finished the 14 miler, I could have done 6 more miles, even if I just had to walk it in. But beyond 20, I have no frame of reference. So the way I'm approaching the training going forward is a little less stressful, honestly, because almost being certain of your failure is a little bit of a relief. I haven't yet in running come across my limits, and I'm about to in the next couple weeks. Luckily, having been a CrossFitter for 5 years, I'm very familiar with failure in the realm of athletics or training, with lifts and movements and things that I can't do. So that part of it I'm kind of prepared for. I'm not worried about that. So, but yeah, I've had to just adjust my expectations, be a little bit more realistic. Talk to my brother-in-law, who's sort of my de facto coach, because he's an ultra runner. He's done quite a few races. He agrees that, you know, it was very ambitious, but there's also nothing wrong with that, with taking a swing and seeing how you do. So I'm gonna find my headspace is fine. In fact, it's probably a little bit improved than the stressful state I've been in over the last couple weeks. So while I have a regimented, thought out, researched, and put together training program, I'm gonna have a little bit of the Courtney DeWalter mindset about it. I'm waking up, I'm seeing how I feel, how my body feels that day, and then I look at what I'm supposed to do, and I just adjust accordingly. Because ultimately, right now, when I'm base building, my main priority is just time on feet. Because the first time I do a 50K, or my first ultra, whether it's successful or not, it's gonna have to involve a lot of slow time on feet, because my legs just can't, and my body can't keep up with doing more than that. And now I hope, of course, that this doesn't seem like a downer kind of thing. I'm actually very, very positive in my mindset, and I'm looking for silver linings. And in that half marathon, well, the 14 miler, that kind of wrecked me for a couple days. Part of the reason was because I ran the first half of it faster than I wanted to. I had had a couple of days of rest from the overexertion at the gym, strength training, so I was ready to run, and I PR'd my 10K and my 15K in the first half of that run, so I was really happy with that. But then I bonked around 8 miles and had to do the last 6 in a pretty low state. But you know, you just grind through it and get through it. It's not that big of a deal. So that was a plus, a couple of pluses that came from the run, even though it crushed me for a couple days. My biggest problem seemed to be calorie intake. I did better than normal. I made sure I ate a couple goos, had a protein shake before. I had more calories than I normally do when I do a run like that. Still wasn't enough. It was like a 5,500 calorie burn day, and I probably consumed, 2,500 calories, something like that. And so for a couple days, I just wasn't there. I just wasn't recovered, and I was so undercaloried that honestly the day after was way worse, which is usually how it is. Felt pretty good immediately after, but that's just because I hadn't borne the stress out yet. So that's the update for the week. We're going to take it a little bit more free and breezy and get back to why I really started loving this at the beginning. And that's, running on trails, which is my favorite thing in the world to do. Close second would be kayaking. Coming up on the only part of this trail that really feels like a trail in the sense that I think of them, which is in the woods. Man, I don't do it often. It is fun running on these flats. Most of the trails that I run on, I average 100 plus feet of vertical gain per mile. Out here, it's probably 100 feet over, 7 or 8 miles. So the sprints are fun out here. It's still a little more difficult for me, especially being new, when it's hilly. And I don't mean rollers, I mean real climbs. Being in Ohio, you wouldn't think there was that much elevation, but it's like, I don't know, that Midwest elevation is subtle. It's an out and back. So it's kind of two different trails. Each one of those is an out and back. And then this is the main trail back to the parking lot. One thing I will say for sure about the whole YouTube and filming thing, it does pass the time. It does help pass the time on boring stuff like this. And I mean, by boring, I mean when I'm making myself walk in between sprints. By the way, what I'm doing on these sprint intervals is I sort of power hike for 0.2 miles, trying to do about a 15-minute walk, 15-minute mile walk, and then alternate with 0.2 miles of sprinting. So that's the structure of it. So luckily there's a lot of built-in time for filming and talking, and it passes the time during those sequences. So that is much appreciated. Kind of fun seeing the trail and the metaphor for the trail right next to each other, which I don't think people really realize. That's just all a road is. This is what roads were for most of human history, and I prefer them a whole lot. So this is finishing up the first half of the run. Another 3.5, but I'm going to go much slower because I'm trying to drag out these minutes for the Evo Lab. It's going to have a bit of a wonder since I'm going to walk a decent amount of this. Day of rest, and then I got another really long run, so I think I'm done sprinting. I did 3.5 miles of it. Well, not full 3.5 miles, but sprinted at intervals for 3.5 miles. So preserve the legs and hopefully give myself a better shot at the long run, which is going to be 16 miles this week. There's a little viewing area up there, but there's a gentleman set up with he's bird watching. And I don't like to disturb people out here on the trail if I don't have to. My trail running is not the biggest priority in the world. So I'm gonna let that gentleman watch his birds in peace. I'm guessing this is his car right here. Good on you, dude. That's a nice way to spend the morning. We'll check out this other viewing area. sometimes it's nice to just take a mile and turn it into a walkabout. I'm not a pro runner. I'm not an elite runner. It's not going to hurt my training at all. And I like to explore the parks just as much as I like to run through them. All right, round 2. This is what my 14.5-minute mile power hike looks like. And this is my 7-minute mile pace. The last of the cicadas, I'm guessing. Well, I guess I lied a little bit, because I have done some more sprinting in the last mile and a half. It just feels so good on these trails, on this flat trail. Sprinting for me is like maybe a 6.5 minute mile pace. That's as fast as I can go right now. Like I said, I've been running for like 4.5 months, something like that. So, but I am going to drag out the last 1 3/4 miles because, like I said, you got to get 300 cumulative minutes of flat terrain running to unlock the Koros Evo Lab. I hope I'm calling it the right thing. I think it's called the Evo Lab. I think I'm about, well, prior to this run, I was about 25% there. So hopefully we'll only have to do 3 or 4 total runs to unlock it, and then I'm done. I mean, I'm not saying I'll never run a flat again, but I like my trails in the woods with elevation. It's my preferred running. This isn't terrible. At least I can feel what it feels like to run fast for a decent period. Because I usually can't do much more than maybe 400 meters on any given trail that I typically run, which would be Chestnut Ridge Metro Park, which is the very first foothill of the Appalachian Mountains, and Clear Creek, which I believe is part of the Hocking Hills park system, but it's about halfway between me and Hocking Hills. That's a great park with lots of trails and some gnarly elevation. Usually get a couple thousand feet over just, maybe 10 miles, 2,000 to 3,000 feet. It's a lot for me, a lot for Ohio for sure. And Hocking Hills, which is, I'm pretty sure it's the most heavily trafficked metro park, I think in the state, but certainly in like the central Ohio area, or southeastern Ohio. It's a very busy park this time of year, but again, great trails. So those are the 3 primary places that I do trail running. Probably 90 to 95% of my trail running is at one of those 3 places, except for right now when we run in the flats. I was hoping to get about 2 hours today, but I just don't want to run that slow today. That would require me to power hike a lot of it, and it's just a waste of the terrain. So I keep running out the way I've been doing these sprint intervals, 2/10 and 2/10 and 2/10 like that, to 6 miles, and then the last mile I'm going to make myself probably walk the whole thing, and make it, you know, take 15, 16 minutes, 17, 18 minutes, depending on how slow I want to go. It'll just be a cool down and, again, drag out the time. Almost done, Koros. Ease on down the road. Oh man, if you haven't seen The Wiz, you don't know what life is. Don't you carry nothing that won't be alone. Ease on down the road. Man, is it muggy. Could use a wizard to whisk me home right about now. At least whisk me to air conditioning. I'm kidding too, by the way. I actually love running, walking and running out in the heat, getting a good sweat on. I love it, but you know, that's just a thing to do. Talk about the weather. I think the best thing about the Midwest is not being mountainous. The only good thing about the Midwest not being mountainous is we get some incredible views of clouds. Finishing up the last mile that I'm gonna run. Well, I'm jogging more now because I want to still be able to talk. But and then I'm gonna have the last mile be a cool down, so I'll just power hike it in. It's going to be a nice day out here. Humid, but pretty. I don't know if the GoPro is going to pick it up, but this is one of my favorite things when it's cloudy and the sun kind of barely comes out, splashes its rays across the green. Simple thing, but I'm not gonna lie, it gives me goosebumps. One last thought here as I'm finishing up 7 miles. When I first started running, especially for the first 2 or 3 weeks, when I could run in relation to when I had to walk was, I don't know, I never sat down and looked at the percentages, but I would say I probably ran 10 to 15% of the time and had to walk all the rest. A lot of that was because of Well, it was partially because of, as I was talking about before, the trails having quite a bit of elevation, but it was also because I just was not a runner. So it was struggling through running to get to the easy walking. And as I've noticed today, it's flipped. I have to power through when I need to make myself walk for either pacing or whatever the purpose. And that I prefer the running segments. So look at you. How'd you make it? These rocks are out of place. So I slowed it down enough. 16-minute mile. I was still did a couple jogs, but just walking it in from here. Productive day, to say the least.